Vote this week, a very important time for our country, and of course, during this time, immigration always a big topic.
It is a huge topic,
Yes.
and we're here to answer questions for you. We got my friend Brett Pouncey with us tonight. He's been doing immigration law here in Birmingham and around the state for over 15 years. He handles naturalization cases. He helps people with deportation. He will have the answers to your questions tonight.
Yes, very knowledgeable and just a great person to
He's a
always
good guy.
chat with. So, Brett, as always, so glad that you are here with us this evening. Just, if you will, just greet our audience tonight and encourage them to call if they have questions, for sure.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. It feels like a long afternoon. You don't know when it gets dark, and
This is true.
5 o'clock goes into 10:30 pretty quickly.
Yes.
But, we've got the number here, and any questions that you have, I'll do the best I can to answer them, and also let you know if I can't.
And tell them a little bit about your practice, Brett. I know you do immigration, but you also help some immigrants with criminal affairs, different things like that. Talk a little bit about what you do.
Okay, Ken. Kirby. Ken was with me a couple of weeks ago.
He's the better half of our
Oh, guys, you make a great whole. Primarily, I do immigration law, focusing most on removal, defense against deportation, in addition to family law, getting families together, keeping families together, bringing family members from outside of the United States to the United States. I started here in Birmingham going on 20 years ago doing primarily criminal defense. And as the criminal defense expanded, my Spanish-speaking, I guess, gift, luckily I lived in New York City and, taught school there and lived in a Hispanic neighborhood. It expanded into people asking me immigration questions, expanding my knowledge there, and sort of going from half and half to, primarily now immigration. But if there are immigrants, non-citizens who are accused of crimes in the United States, it's good to have someone who can let them know the consequences of whatever the outcomes of the cases may be, and give them the best advice as to, how to handle it based on a case-by-case factual basis.
Brett, when someone comes to see you and they have an immigration issue, what do they need to bring with them? How do you start the process of naturalization?
Typically, the process of naturalization would be nice because that means that they already have lawful permanent residence in their green card. So naturalization is sort of the be-all, end-all for those that want to become U.S. citizens. When someone contacts us initially, we have a detailed intake form. One of my assistants will start by gathering information, biographical information, information about their family members, information about their histories. And then based on that, they'll typically have a specific question or a specific issue. Sometimes they will have an immigration court date coming up and they need to know, okay, do I have to go to my first appearance with a lawyer? What am I looking at? What equities do I have that might allow me to stay in the United States and eventually, use those equities to hopefully gain status, or at least to make plans to what my future is going to be like. You have someone who has a family member out of the country. We want to get as much information as possible to give the non-citizen, the foreign national, as we would call them, the best advice possible. Sometimes the best advice is, there's not a whole lot we can do for you. We're not going to lead you down a road to where you're going to have expectations that cannot be met. Sometimes it's just planning the best for the future, and hope that you can remain here and fight the fight. But at the same time, if there's not anything that can be done for you, sort of make the plans, stay here as long as you can, and hopefully things might change during the process, which we've run into many cases like that. It's just, it's about being as honest with someone based on the information that hopefully, honestly, they give us.
And when we think about that process, and I know it's hard to say because it's a case-by-case basis, but to become a citizen, it could be anywhere from how long to how long?
Oh gosh. If one is a lawful permanent resident of the United States, which means a green card holder, 5 years of holding that status would allow you then in the majority of cases, to apply for naturalization.
Okay.
Depending on where you come to get to that lawful permanent resident status, there's so many ways that you can try to get there.
Okay.
It really does go by case basis. If you're in immigration removal proceedings and you happen to have U.S. citizen family members,
Okay.
If you're able to show an immigration judge or potentially the Board of Immigration Appeals, if the judge decides to deny your case, that your removal from the country would cause extremely and excessively unusual hardship to your U.S. citizen relatives, you can win your case that way. Very difficult standard, but not impossible.
Okay.
If you happen to have a U.S. citizen spouse and you're in the United States, you can have your spouse apply for you,
Okay.
go through a process that may or may not cause you to have to leave the country to go through a consular interview. And depending on how the consulates in other countries are working and time frames, we could be looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 years before you finally get your interview.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to leave the country, sometimes you can stay in the country, depending on your background of how you arrived here.
Okay.
We could go on
There
for a
you go.
long
Yes.
time on these case-by-case bases, but
Yeah.
it's a very complicated but very rewarding area of the law, and it gives you the opportunity to hopefully be able to help people, or at least to give people guidance
Yes.
to make their lives as fruitful as possible.